Hello everyone, I am here with Rob in the Pacem family, who I went camping with, and I mentioned that he doesn't have a social insurance number or a credit card or even a driver's license, yet he still drives. And he also...
I travel.
That's right. Already correct the word. We'll go into that too. And he also works with healing the divine masculine and feminine, and also how to build earthships. He's built his own earthship, and emancipating land as well. It's incredibly fascinating. I'm very excited to talk with him today and share him with all of you. But before, we're not going to go into his story per se today. We're going to mainly focus on understanding the trap of how we get agree to give our freedom away and get stuck in this system, and how we can basically get out of it, right? So we usually do role playing. It's how he did it on the camping trip, which was really, really lovely. And since we don't have enough people today to do that with, we're going to improvise. So take it away, Rob.
Okay. So this is about relationships, and what is our relationship with the king?
Yeah.
And most people don't comprehend that relationship because we have been lied to, and it's been hidden from us. But what I found out is that relationship is feudal in nature, and most people think feudalism ended, a few hundred years ago, but it's actually still going on today. So as I shared in the ceremony that you were at, this is all about relationship. This is navigating relationships, and if people don't comprehend the nature of their relationship with the king, then how can we free ourselves or emancipate ourselves from that?
Okay.
So what I found out is that relationship works like feudalism. Most people think feudalism ended a few hundred years ago, but it's still actually functioning today.
For those who don't know, what does feudalism mean?
Feudalism is an ancient form of governance where people swore an oath to a king, surrendered all their property in exchange for protection and benefits and maybe even some privileges from the king. And so hundreds of years ago, they may be required to serve in the king's military, or give a percentage of their crops or percentage of their wood that they harvested, that sort of thing. In exchange, the king would protect them.
Okay.
And that's kind of how things are going right now.
All right.
And so the other challenge, though, is that the system also uses fictional constructs to manage that through ideas like corporations.
Okay.
And so we have a mixture now of feudalism and corporate structures that produce modern countries. And if we want to navigate that, we have to figure out how that actually works.
And also explore our relationship with the king, because it actually all stems from our relationship with our royalty.
Correct. Yeah, because Canada is a constitutional monarchy, which means the king is the head of the country. And now, politicians will say, well, that's just ceremonial, but I would suggest otherwise.
Now, this is not just what you're going to share here is not just for Canadians, but also all over the world. This applies to, right?
Yeah.
The states as well.
Well, the U.S. is a bit different because they had their revolution and emancipated themselves from the king, but they still set up their country using feudal systems because they inherited a lot of it from England anyway. So yeah, it would still apply, but there's no king. Instead, the president would be the king.
Okay.
So just want to go through this scenario and
Yeah.
kind of teach people how this relationship actually works.
Yes.
Okay.
You can say hi to everybody, Rob.
Hello.
We shy. It's easier for him to do a conversation rather than look at the camera. So
Yeah.
I'll every now and then look at the camera and say,
Okay. So I'm going to start with the king, and we have some stuffed animals here. So
that's why improvisations are suggested. So this is going to be our king.
Yeah. So this is our
This-
king.
this-
Let's get rid of this. for
This
now.
lovely orangutan with the nipples.
Okay.
Okay.
So here's our king.
Yep.
And when the king swore his oath, he swore it on a Bible, and at that point, he was merged with a corporation.
By swearing the oath on the Bible, that merged him into the corporation?
Yeah, that was part of that process. So
Okay.
the corporation is called the crown. Okay. Now the corporation, the word comes from the root word corpus, which is a dead body. And so the crown is the dead body. That corporation is the one that actually holds all the land of his kingdom. So the land of Canada is held, England, Australia, all the other Commonwealth countries are all held under this corporation.
Of death.
Yeah, because it's dead. Okay.
The living dead. It gives a new spin to a lot of,
Yeah.
you know, why we're so anti-life in a lot of ways. The way our government is just the opposite of everything, right? Or why live spelled backwards is evil, or lived spelled backwards is devil. Like, again, just opposite of life, anti-life.
Right. So we're going to use this black cloak to represent the corporation.
Okay.
And I kind of view it as like the Dementors in Harry Potter.
Okay.
You know, they just kind of suck the life. So when he swore his oath, they essentially
So Dementors in
merged-
Harry Potter, okay.
merged him
Yeah.
with this corporation, and this is the crown. And so now this is called a corporation soul, S-O-L-E, meaning singular. So when you reference the king, you're referencing the corporation. When you reference the corporation, you're referencing the king. They become one.
Okay.
Okay.
Kind of like with the capital letters of our names as well.
Yeah,
Or-
we'll get to that.
Okay.
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 Now he needs help managing, governing his kingdom.
Okay.
And so he splits up his kingdom into manors.
Mhm.
We call them countries now, but it's still a manor. And so for Canada,
Yeah.
he then assigns somebody to look after that manor. And so we'll get another character here. So here's the Governor General of Canada.
Okay.
Okay. And when she swore an oath,
Yeah.
she turned to him, got on a, not literally on a knee, but
Yeah.
in the old times they would go on a knee, but she swore an oath to serve him.
Okay.
Okay. And we'll just use this. Okay. So this is another corporation.
Right.
And so now at that time when she swore her oath, she put on a corporation, and it's called the King in Right of Canada.
Okay.
Okay. So, and if you look in the Governor General's Act, Section 2, it actually says, it's a corporation soul. So here's another corporation soul. So when you reference the Governor General, you reference the King in Right of Canada. You reference the King in Right of Canada, you reference the Governor General. They become one.
And
Okay.
people need to kind of understand that that's what corporation soul means, because again, we have a different interpretation when we see that.
Right.
Okay. It's long enough. The king has it too. It's an extension. Okay.
So now she's managing the manor. So
Okay.
she lives in a manor house. That's the house that she actually lives in. It's,
Okay.
those big stately houses.
Estates.
But she needs help too.
Okay.
So she has a court.
Okay.
Her court is the Privy Council. It's
Okay.
actually the highest court in Canada, not the Supreme Court. So we have Supreme Court, which is the judicial branch.
Right.
We have the executive branch, and then we have the administrative branch. All three are actually courts.
Okay.
Okay. And so when the Supreme Court justices swear their oath, they swear an oath to the king through her, and they become members of the Privy Council.
Okay.
And when people elect members of Parliament, the winning party gets invited, like she invites them to form a government, and they then, the ministers and the prime minister, then swear an oath to the king through her to serve the king, and they're ministering to the king.
Right. Okay.
So they don't actually minister to the people. They don't actually have a responsibility to the people. Their responsibility is to the king.
So it's rigged to not in our favor, basically. Like, we think that they're looking after the people and this is all set up for the people, but it's actually all set up to serve and protect the king, like chess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Playing chess, we didn't even know it.
Yeah. Well, and nobody asked the question. Like, until you ask the question, they're not going to admit it.
Yeah, that's true.
They have no duty to inform people or teach people about all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's our responsibility.
Okay.
Okay. So the Governor General then there's other manners.
Peaches might volunteer.
Okay, so the Governor General would then assign lieutenant governors. So here's Lieutenant Governor. We're in BC, so let's pretend this is Lieutenant Governor of BC. And I'm not sure if it's who the Lieutenant Governor is. Well, let's just say it's a he.
So right now you know this one's a female.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've done your research and your homework. This is a good way to help people understand with puppets.
Yeah. So he's responsible for
the puppets.
For the manor called British Columbia.
Okay.
And he has provincial jurisdiction. She has federal jurisdiction based on a act passed by the king in England. So that's what the Constitution Act of 1982 is, and that's what the B&A Act was as well. Canada doesn't actually have a constitutional document. It's actually just a piece of legislation this guy passed and brought here.
Okay.
And so he's responsible for provincial, and so he's got a little cloak as well too. So when he swears an oath, he's swearing an oath to the king through her, and at that point he gets a cloak, and that corporation is called the King and Right of BC.
Wow.
Okay.
The Death Alliance.
And so he's responsible for managing this manor, and he has a court as well too. It's called the executive. I can't remember the second term of the. It's not a privy council, but executive council.
Okay.
And the premier and the ministers are a member of that council, and that's a court too. Okay. So we have all of these dead bodies wrapped around people pretending to animate and represent something that's actually dead. Okay. So far, so good?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So
we'll do a live later on, and you guys, if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask and follow up, but I thought this would be a really good way to explain it.
Yeah. So when people then vote or apply to receive benefits or privileges from any of these characters, they're essentially swearing an oath, and that is the same as taking a knee and swearing to the king, because now you're receiving something from the king through the Governor General or Lieutenant Governor. So they represent the king. If he actually shows up here, he presents himself. They represent him.
Okay.
And so citizens, whether you're aware of it or not, end up swearing an oath of fealty to the king.
So I'm a citizen, right? Because I'm in the system. So we're all citizens. So how do we end up? I don't remember swearing any loyalty to the king. So how do we end up
the word
in that situation?
The word signature
Yeah.
is an attestation, and an attestation is an oath. So when you sign something, you're making an oath, whether you're aware of it or not.
Okay. Meaning signing, so anything for like
applying for social insurance number, or driver's license, or healthcare, or any of those things, getting on a voter's list, all that kind of stuff is you participating in swearing an oath to the king, because now you're receiving benefits and privileges from the king.
Did you know that?
Okay. Now, as citizens or feudal serfs, I like to use the word feudal serf because that's actually what it is. Citizen is a word that kind of hides all this from people because they don't comprehend the nature of that relationship.
But feudal means, if I understand it correctly, it's like, it's situation is futile. There's nothing you can do, basically. Is that what it actually means, or is that
feudal?
How we understand futile? And serf is like servant.
Feudal, not futile.
Okay. Feudal is
a system of governance where people are obedient and serving an earthly master.
Okay, and serf is not servant?
A serf is like a servant. It's like a slave.
Okay,
Yeah.
Same with like sir.
So if I use the word serf, you can replace that with slave.
Is that where the word sir came from too?
No, sir is a title granted from the king that he gave to his knights.
Okay.
His military.
I also saw somewhere that it's also associated with servant. Sir, madam, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all right.
I don't. I don't.
That's okay.
Agree with that, but
okay.
That's okay.
Well, I have to. It's a lot to look into when you're studying words and the origins of words in the Latin version, and where we think they mean versus what they actually are, and so forth. And that's how we also a big part of being trapped without realizing it.
Well, and that's the thing is, for me, I learned all this legal stuff, but in the end, my emancipation came by studying the language, the English language, not the legal fiction language, because this is a different language than the language we're speaking now.
And that's also what happened to the natives. They said, you mentioned it, that we're going to seed the land, and the natives thought, oh, hey, they're going to put seeds on the land, but actually they meant CEDE, which means
to surrender and turn over the land.
Yeah,
but the
brutal.
sad part is that the men didn't have authority to do that. They only had the authority to negotiate peace. Ceding of the land rested with the women, and the crown didn't talk to the women because the women had no standing as far as they were concerned.
Brutal.
Okay,
continue on.
So let's explore this relationship that people have then with all of this. Okay, so here's a citizen. Okay, so let's pretend that he's going to apply for a driver's license. Okay, so we're just gonna use little pieces of grass here. So
it's a driver's license?
Driver's license is provincial, so that goes to the lieutenant governor. So the lieutenant governor has his ministers. So I'll pretend to be the premier, and I'm responsible for setting up Service BC. Okay.
What about Justin Trudeau? We didn't have him.
We're
getting there.
Okay. Okay. So I set up a service called Service BC. Now, Service BC isn't actually designed to provide services to BC, to the citizens.
Okay.
Service is a feudal term that describes what is owed as a result of receiving a grant or a tenure from the king.
Okay.
Okay, so when the lieutenant governor issues the driver's license, service is owed. Okay, and that service comes in the form of fees and fines, or speeding tickets, that kind of stuff. Okay, and so this is called a tenure,
right?
Which is a grant from the king to receive a certain privilege.
Right.
Okay, so now there's a privilege to be able to, quote unquote, drive.
Right.
Okay, so this citizen then receives this privilege, and he then has to pay those services to the lieutenant governor, and that money ends up being the property of the king. That's the king's money. It's not taxpayers' money or any of that kind of stuff. That's the king's money. That was owed by, this guy.
He was not informed of any of this.
No.
Completely.
No.
Tricked.
Okay. So here's one tenure. Okay. So let's say he wants to buy a house.
Okay.
Okay. So most of the land is provincial, so that would be under this guy.
Okay.
But there is some federal land which belongs to her.
Yeah.
Okay. So federal land is things like reserves and some parks and the 3 territories. That's all federal.
Right.
Okay. The rest falls in the jurisdiction of the provinces.
Okay.
So when you buy land, what you're actually doing is buying a tenure, which is a grant from the king to possess the land, not own it. Okay. And with this tenure, what's owed, the service owed, is the property taxes. That's your rent. And when you look on the title, it actually lists you as a tenant.
I'm surprised people don't see this and think about this at all or question that. This is right there in the paperwork, right? But I guess nobody reads paperwork,
and
they just sign.
And even on the document, there's a thing called a tax roll.
Yeah.
And the roll is what his courts are responsible for maintaining the rolls, because they are responsible for maintaining the accuracy of his books, which actually started with William the Conqueror in 1066, when he created the Domesday Book, which was essentially an inventory of the king's domain and all the people and all the land and all the resources, and so his courts are responsible for keeping that up to date and accurate. And that's what the tax roll is the identification number on the rolls of his inventory of his property. And so when you get a title, you also have to get permission to do any upgrades or building or that kind of stuff. That's why you have to get building permits and get inspections and follow building codes and all that kind of stuff. That's the responsibility that comes with holding this tenure.
Right. That's not very free after all, even though I have a house.
No. And so
this house,
the actual ownership still rests with this guy.
Yeah.
Through the manors that these guys are managing, but it's all his. Yeah. Through the corporation. The corporations are the ones that actually hold the land, because if this guy changes out for a new guy, they don't have to go through a whole complex process. They just pull the corporation off, replace the guy, and then put the corporation back on. So the ownership rests with this fiction, with this corporation.
So that's what you're saying now, is because this one now agrees to have a house and signs a paper, puts his signature on, now they're, from being, I guess, if they didn't have a driver's license or any of those kind of things, they would be living in peace and in not in the death world. Right. But now it's agreeing to wear this cloak as well without even knowing it. So now it's in the death game, basically.
Yeah. So
let's just stick it under.
Let's go back to the driver's license. Okay.
Okay.
So the driver's license is a corporation too. Yeah. And so when he puts on the driver's license, what he's doing is he's putting on
The
a death cloak
Yeah.
and turning himself into a corporation soul as well.
Anytime we sign anything, our signature or any with the government, then we are agreeing to wear the death cloak and be in the death rules and game.
Whenever we're using them,
Yeah.
okay, so we can put this away and take the cloak off. And then when we pull this out and give it to somebody, we're putting the cloak back on. So that's a free will choice that we have.
But we don't drive unless we have our driver's license.
Which
and
means
so
you're putting the cloak on.
And because the first thing they do is they say, if you get pulled over by a police officer, they want to see your ID. And then they point to your driver's license.
But is it your ID?
Well, that's what, it's
Okay.
not, right? Why do they first of all want that? Because the first thing they do is they point to the picture of you and your name, and they say, well, is this you? And we, of course, think, well, that's a picture of me, that's my name, so we agree with it to it. First agreement we make, right? And then they go, blah, 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 do you understand? And we think, yeah, well, I understand the words you're saying, but what we're actually saying is because we don't understand the origin of the words, and we don't understand that we're playing this death cloak game, that we basically are agreeing to be under them, and now they have full control over them. We've given all of our rights, and now we're in their jurisdiction, and it's not rigged in our favor, basically.
So when you give a name and a birth date, what you're doing is you're identifying the corporation
when they're born,
and then you're putting it on. So now when they act on the corporation, they can act on you.
Because when we're born, our name is all in capital letters on the birth certificate that they give us.
That's not your name.
Yes, I know.
It's not your birth certificate. It's not your driver's license. If you actually look on it, it's actually the property of the king. It belongs to the king. You agree.
Then we belong to the king. Where the parents are agreeing to put their kids to agree that they belong to the king. Sorry. Right? The parents are unknowingly agreeing to give their kids to the king.
Yeah, because they turned over legal title of their kids to the king.
Without them knowing it.
Without them knowing. This is all through ignorance.
Yeah.
Okay? But we can clean up our mess.
Well, you live off grid. You're going to tell people how you did it.
Right. Okay, so
a kid, birth certificate, it's not who we are. Just helping you.
Oh yeah,
there you go.
Thank you. So, because it's not our property, we've agreed to be the legal representative of it.
Corporate fiction.
Okay, that was part of the agreement when we were signing. That's part of the terms and conditions of accepting the tenure.
Right.
Okay, is that we are the legal representative of it. But this legal tenure, that's the person. We're not the person. We are spiritual beings having this physical experience. And when we take on these tenures, these are the persons that the police or the authorities are referencing when they're asking us. Okay, so we need to know who we are in order to navigate this in a healthy way.
That's why, sorry, in Alice in Wonderland, the caterpillar keeps saying, "Who are you? Who are you?" And everything she says is, no, it's not accurate, basically, because in order to free ourselves, we have to know who we really are, and that not just know it, then we have to act like that.
Right. Yeah.
It's not enough to say the words.
Yeah.
Walk the talk.
So we have all these tenures, okay, and so let's talk about her.
Okay.
And so we have, prime minister. So, the prime minister is part of. Here's the prime minister right there.
We're gonna have Buzz be the prime minister.
Okay, so the prime minister then is responsible for setting up Service Canada, and he's sworn an oath to the king through the Governor General.
Okay.
And so he's now serving not the people, but somebody else.
Again, the king.
Okay.
Right? He's serving the king, the prime minister.
Right.
So, again, this is why, okay, then people would want to ask, and I asked you this, but I'll just ask you again, why are they so, it seems like everything is against the country, what they're doing against the people kind of a thing. Why are they doing that? Why are they ruining the country and everything? Justin Trudeau, why are you doing that?
Because what they're doing is they're, with the support of the king, is signing international agreements, treaties, which usurps the manners to try to destroy all this and have everything governed through global governance rather than through federal or provincial governance.
So if they make a big mess of our country, then people are like, this isn't working, and then the UN and the WHO comes in and goes, yeah, that's right, that's why you need to do like what we suggest, this one world government, right?
Yeah,
Is it
but that's up to the king.
Well, the king seems to be for it because
he's the one that's doing it.
Yeah,
so he's asking these guys to implement it, and they have to because they swore an oath to him.
And every time we just go along with it, then we're facilitating it, but no one is basically, what you said, which is very interesting, is no one's holding the king accountable for his actions.
Right.
And so he just continues to get away with it, and these puppets continue to assist in that. Sorry, boss, you have to wear this cloak just for a short bit. Oh, sorry, like that.
Yeah, so he's wearing one too.
So now you're a part of that.
Okay, so when people fight all this, they go through the courts. Yeah. But the courts are all a part of this as well too. Yeah. They swore an oath to the king. They didn't swear an oath to the people. Okay, so the courts are complicit. The executive branch, which is the military, the police, they're complicit. Yeah. And then the administrative branch, which he represents, they're complicit too. Right. So all three branches are now complicit in this global agenda to try to globalize governance.
Crimes against humanity.
Well, it is a crime, but we're all, most people, I shouldn't say we're all, most people are still a part of this and participating with it because they're standing here as a feudal serf,
going along with
oblivious because of their own ignorance of how all this works.
And that's all we know too. We don't know anything else. You just you
have
a child, you do this. When you want a license, you do this. When you want to work, you have to get a social insurance number, tax-paying citizen, blah blah blah, and it's all perpetuating.
Right, generation after generation. Yeah. Because this has been going on for hundreds of years. Yeah. You know, the empire that he's governing started in 1066. Okay. So it's been going on for almost 1,000 years. Wow. Okay. And so if you read things like Blackstone's commentaries, or there's a book called A Treatise on Copyhold, it was written in 1817, I believe. It describes all of this that I'm sharing with you right now.
Well, what about the Charter of Rights? Because people are always like, well, I have rights. Where are my rights in all of this? They can't do this.
So the Charter was passed by the King and given to Canada. And the Charter, there's section, don't quote me on the number, I think it's like 37 or 38. In it, it describes that the Charter applies to these guys, to the bureaucrats, that kind of stuff. It's actually not your charter rights. The charter is the box that these guys are supposed to operate in, because you actually have way more rights than what these guys do. And so it's not your rights, it's the limits that these guys are supposed to function in. And so these people are responsible for knowing that box, and so that when these guys step out of that box, they can put them back in the box with that tool.
This one can put them in the box, or they put him in the box, citizen?
It's his duty to put these guys back in the box when they step out of the box.
So how can he or we do that?
Well, we can do that by challenging them on their claims. And
that's what you did?
That's what I do.
Okay.
So I can do it as... I could do it as a citizen. Yeah. Or I can do it as me, a spiritual being. I don't have to be a citizen to put these guys back in their box.
So what do you mean by being a citizen? Do you mean still in the system and still having all these
tenures,
and corporate
corporations?
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So you can still do that even though you're a citizen.
Okay.
Or you can do that when you emancipate yourself from the system and stand as a spiritual being.
Okay.
Which I do.
So, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Or are we jumping ahead on how to get there? And also I want to add, I didn't mention in the beginning, is that you are also looking for apprentices to teach all this too and work with you closely, right?
Yeah, I'd like to find some people who are, interested in learning this and walking this path, because it is a way of life.
And living off grid and stepping away from all of this and knowing how to do this.
Doing the healing work.
Yeah. Healing your masculine and feminine.
Yep. Integrating the traumas and the shadows, and it's a dedication. It's a commitment to walking this path. And so if there are people that want to start walking this path, I'm willing to start being a mentor to some apprentices who are willing then to hold space for others to be able to navigate all this and help people to emancipate themselves and heal and reconcile their relationships. Because for me, this is about doing this peacefully.
Right.
Because this is all a war machine. Like, he's the head of the military.
Yeah.
She's the head of the military. It's the military that runs this, and then they have the judicial and administrative branches on the side. But it's all based on military. It's all based on war, on conquest, on on genocide and murder and all that kind of stuff. So
how they can get away with everything all the time, and we signed our rights away. We agreed to this. We just didn't know we agreed to this. Right. We didn't read the fine print.
You didn't read the fine print.
Yeah.
But also, when you sign up to be a citizen, you're a member of this military.
So let's say this citizen wakes up and realizes, well, I have my house, I have my driver's license, and they wake up to what's going on about this. And so they start studying these things that are out there, which is getting out this information like common law, sovereignty, and all of that. And so he decides for his property, he's going to get a trust, put it in a trust. What do you have to say to that?
Okay, so first off, it's not his house.
Okay.
He's got a tenure.
Right.
Which is a grant from the king for him to possess the land, not own it.
Because there's a lot of places, people that are teaching you just need a trust and that secures your house.
That secures the grant-ish.
Right.
But it's still part of this system. So the king can change the rules at any time. That's the problem. Because it's the king's domain.
Oh, so Wonderland.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, this is about changing how we relate to the land. Because for me, I acknowledge that, my body came from the land, it's nourished by the land, protected, sheltered by the land, and returns to the land when I'm done with it. So when my body has that kind of relationship with the land, it is the land. And so if anybody's claiming ownership over the land, they're putting me and everyone else into involuntary slavery.
I wish they are.
I'm not interested in that anymore.
Okay.
So I'm not going to make a claim of ownership over the land. Because
so trust is playing the same game, basically. It doesn't really get you out of that situation, but it makes you think you are.
You're still in this system, but you're just putting a little layer of protection on it to be able to keep playing this game.
Okay, so what about allodial title? Because that's another thing you're told to do to secure their land and their house and so forth.
He's the one that has allodial title.
But now this one did all this paperwork and learned all these things about, common law and sovereignty, and now they have an allodial title. Now what?
Well, if they're going to claim allodial title, now there's a conflict between his claim and their claim. And the one making the claim has the burden of proof. And so I'm not going to make claims like that. Instead, I challenge him to prove his claims, because he did engage in fraud and genocide and manipulation and extortion and all kinds of other crimes. And so, my experience in Ontario was that when I was speaking to the Lieutenant Governor, because it was provincial Crown land that I was challenging her on, she couldn't stand on it because she couldn't prove that it was in good standing because they did engage in genocide and fraud and murder and all that kind of stuff.
And you wrote a letter to her, and you wrote actually several letters to her,
right?
Stating your sovereignty, your spiritual being.
Yes,
because we don't
clarifying my standing.
Yeah, we're not going to read them here. We're just going to try to reiterate them as best we can, and point form of the things that you put in this letter.
Right. So I challenged her to prove that this crown land that I was looking at was in good standing, and that she didn't engage in fraud and manipulation or genocide or any of that kind of stuff. And then I gave her 10 days, and she didn't respond. So I sent her a notice of default and asked her to, once again, given her an opportunity. And if I didn't hear from her, then she agreed to all these facts that, yeah, she actually did engage in genocide and fraud and all that kind of stuff. And she still didn't respond. And so then I held a ceremony, and I asked the women in the ceremony to speak for the land, because the land is our mother. It's divine feminine.
Yeah.
And divine feminine needs to be heard now.
Yeah.
She's been silenced for far too long.
Right.
And
Totally
divine
agree.
feminine's been owned and controlled and raped and pillaged and, just totally disrespected. And her voice needs to be heard now. So I asked divine feminine in the ceremony to speak. And they spoke, and they identified her name, Silent Dancer, and they identified that she didn't want to be referenced as a legal land description or GPS coordinates, any of that kind of stuff, and that she wanted to be free. So my role then was to speak to him through her on what the land was speaking, because these guys don't speak the language of the land. They only speak legalese.
Okay.
And it's only through this dead body, and dead bodies don't talk. So, I have to translate it from
Our king's gonna fall.
From how spiritual beings communicate through feeling and language into a language that these guys understand through the dead corporate fiction.
Right.
And that was essentially a declaration of sovereignty of the land.
And you even made your own flag too for this land, Silent Dancer in Ontario.
No, that's my flag, not the
I
flag
thought it
of
was
the
for
land.
okay.
No, that's my flag.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it was that letter, that declaration, that she responded to, acknowledging the letter and sending her best wishes.
That's right, I saw it. Yeah.
Which is
emancipation of that land. Therefore, they relinquish complete ownership of it because they realize that you know the game, you're not playing it, and they have to answer for all their crimes.
And they have no standing on it.
And they have no standing on it.
So they have to acknowledge. All they can do is acknowledge it.
And you've been traveling across Canada.
Across Turtle Island.
Turtle Island.
Because
that's the true name. Thank you for the correction. Emancipating land and holding space in ceremonies.
To teach people
Yes.
how all this works so that we can start navigating this.
Yes.
So, I'm not saying that all the work that people are doing, with trusts and private membership agreements and all that kind of stuff isn't valid. Because what I do is a huge leap from where people are as citizens. And we need stepping stones. We need bridges to help get people from where they're currently at to living the way I live.
Right.
And so, explore the trust, explore the private membership agreements and all that kind of stuff, but don't stop there. Keep working, keep healing, keep navigating, because that's just stepping stones to get through emancipating ourselves from this whole corporate death cult.
Can the trusts and private member associations and claiming a allodial title get us in trouble? Because a lot of times people who've been doing this for years, who've been working on trying to figure this out, and I've been aware of this kind of stuff for quite a long time, since my early 20s, people just didn't have enough information, and so they were getting in trouble as they're trying to go after their bond, which is like our stock, our birth certificate is worth, like, we're all worth millions, billions of dollars, and people try to get after that, or taxes, and then they end up getting in trouble because they don't know fully this information, exactly how it works, exactly what they're claiming, and,
Okay.
and so
So let's talk about that.
yes.
So
Because I know it's on everyone's mind and why people are studying this to begin with.
So here's a mom and she has a baby. Okay. She then signs a document and gives it to the lieutenant governor. And the lieutenant governor then issues a birth certificate. And the certificate of live birth, the document that she actually signed, then gets sent to the bank. And so I don't know what can we use to represent the bank, but you know, something.
Peach.
Okay, Peach is now the banker. Okay, so she then takes that document and turns it into a commodity and issues a QSIP number.
Okay.
And this guy then borrows against this because this represents future earnings from when that individual becomes a taxpayer and pays taxes and all that kind of stuff. So, because he wants the money now. But this isn't owned by the individual. This is owned by this guy.
Right.
And the bank. And the bank then turns around and then sells it on the open market to investors.
Okay.
Okay. So if people are claiming this,
yeah,
and it's not theirs, what's that called?
Fraud.
Yeah. And that's why people are getting into trouble, because it's not actually theirs. It's owned.
But they think they worked for it, and then the government deducted it, and so therefore they're claiming it back. And
because they don't understand the nature of the relationship.
right.
Because when
the nature of relationships, that's key, not just with the king, but also with tenure.
Right. So when this guy is working, he asks permission from this guy to work under a social insurance number, and the terms and conditions is that any of his income has to go through this guy and be taxed. That tax is a service owed for the privilege of working under a social insurance number with this guy.
So everything we make technically isn't ours at all. Like it's all theirs, and if we ever try to claim it back, then we're claiming for. Okay. I got it.
So if you want to keep all your money, stop working under a social insurance number, which is a feudal tenure.
But then you can't work any job because there's you have
because
to completely be independent.
Because all the jobs are controlled by this guy.
That's right. Okay. So they trap us in this way.
Right, because then it really limits what people can do.
Yeah. And people don't know how to live off grid to feed themselves and stuff like that. So they want to be, we're always in, it feels like so many people are in that situation and 1 foot in the system because they have to be, because they don't know how to function outside of it still fully, and 1 foot outside the system trying to figure out how to do it. And that's what I love about what you're doing is you're that missing piece.
So this guy here, if he wants to be free, he has to acknowledge that the nature of his relationship with these guys is that he's completely dependent on them.
There we go.
Okay, so the dependency is what these guys love. These guys want to make everyone dependent because they get all kinds of money coming in because of all the service owed because of this feudal relationship. Okay, so if we want to be free, we have to remove our dependency, which means all of these tenures that they got. Yeah. Let's send them all back because they're not ours.
That's what you did.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Okay, they weren't mine.
You sent your birth certificate back?
It's not mine. It's theirs. I sent the birth certificate back. I sent the driver's license.
What's the your? Okay.
The passport and all that kind of stuff because it's not my property.
Wow.
I was only being the legal representative of it.
Wow.
It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to these guys. And I just ignorantly became the legal representative of it and managed its affairs and finances and all that kind of stuff for these guys.
So what if all the people that are awake in Canada, their Truck Trudeau stickers and all that kind of stuff, we all did that. We all sent back our
then these guys would be out of business.
Them.
They would have to shut the doors.
But then people would have to also know what to do because they think they can't travel, they can't do this, they can't do that, right? Because we are, like you said, so dependent off of them, and they know we need them, but they need us more than we need them. that's really the truth of the matter.
So
they made us dependent. We've been raised to be dependent. Our parents have the same, been raised, grandparents and so forth. So it's a vicious cycle that needs to be broken.
Right. So his responsibility now is to restore his independence. So he needs now to learn how to provide shelter, how to grow his own food, and all that kind of stuff.
And that's what you know as well, how to do, how to build your own earthship.
Well, that's how I did it, is by learning all these skills so that I wasn't dependent on these guys.
Years and years all by yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of people in the freedom movement, they'll, declare sovereignty, but they're still, living in the cities and dependent.
Going to the grocery stores, using their credit cards. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they get into trouble because if they go in front of the judge and the judge says, they say, hey, I'm free, and the judge looks and sees all of this evidence of these feudal tenures that they hold. Yeah. The judge is going to say, you don't know who you are, you need a psychiatric assessment. And I've had many friends go through psychiatric assessments because of that.
Brutal.
Okay. So freedom isn't about fighting the system. Freedom is about learning the skills on how to govern ourselves and look after ourselves so we're not dependent on these guys anymore. Okay, now the trap I went through is I went to the other extreme and went completely hyper independent, which is a trauma response as well. And so now what I'm exploring through ceremonies is let's start restoring our tribes that we had before all of this took place.
You can't do it alone. You try to do it all alone, and it's very, very hard. And even though you were successful with dealing with that story about those officials that came to you, and then you kind of gave them an education as well.
With the building inspector and bylaw enforcement officers and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Want to quickly share that too, and then we'll go back to where I know you're heading towards?
Sure.
Can't do it.
Yeah, so some examples, I guess, is what you're asking for on how this applies. So I had a neighbor who had a visit by, this guy, he's a provincial, but he passed legislation for the municipalities, and so this guy's responsible for building codes, and because these tenures have duties and responsibilities, you have to follow the codes, you have to follow the rules that this guy sets. And so they came and confronted her, and so what I did, because unfortunately for them, they ran into me first, so that got me involved. Yeah. And so I challenged them on their claims. So I don't believe in going to war against this, because this is a war machine. I'll lose. Yeah. Okay, so I declared peace back in 2008 when I declared my sovereignty. So I have to be peaceful. So I agreed with their claims, but I then placed the burden on them to prove their claims. And because I know how all this works, I confronted them on, how they, make claim of land and, following the Municipality Act and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing too is I also told them that I don't, that I waive my right to be represented as a person, because remember, this thing's the person. Right. Okay. I don't have this. So
you gave all that back.
I gave that
you
all
gave
that
your
back.
death cloak back to them when you gave all your documents back. So that made it really
clear that I'm not a subject. Yeah. I'm somebody else.
Yeah, I don't apply.
So I'm the king's brother. So I have a direct relationship with the king now.
When you gave all your stuff back, you basically said, we're on the same level. Now we are brothers. We're not fighting anymore. And that's so interesting, because we think we have to fight them, and like you said, you'll never win. And it's also this kind of forgiveness, right? In a way, that it's just love, even though they've done all these horrible things to us in humanity, and they still will answer to it. It's not like they're getting away from it. No. But the only way you can win is refuse to fight, refuse to be in this war, and say, let them know that you're equals, and speak their language that they know, and it just completely diffuses everything and liberates you.
And when I go through this process, the third step is holding ceremony. So I invite them to a reconciliation and forgiveness ceremony as the third part of the process. Because it's my job to forgive, not to judge. And, you know, they've never come, but that's not the point. Is I still hold the ceremony because it's my job to forgive them and plant seeds, and hopefully that they will start to heal. And I eventually, you know, if the king, you know, figures it out and redeems himself, I would be more than happy to invite him to my dinner table.
I feel also that they all want us to wake up. That's why they're making it so crazy, ridiculous, horrible. They're basically thinking, how bad can we make it before they realize what's going on and they decide to like no longer play this game and step out of it.
See, I don't hate what they're doing. I'm actually grateful for what they did, because they made things so uncomfortable. It woke me up to realize that I'm the one that was so dependent that I was placing a huge burden on them to look after me.
Yeah, because we're always like, write letters, fix them. We need a leader that actually cares. They never will, because they've always sworn alliance to this one. So even like Justin Trudeau is horrible. Sorry, Blossom. But like, and Pierre Poilievre seems great, but he will eventually be made to be like.
He's sworn an oath to him too.
Yeah, particularly because he's in the system. He's playing these rules, so we can never have like, we think we can fix this by voting or having a good leader, but they can
this
never.
Isn't the problem. The problem is that we're dependent, and we've usurped ourselves, our sovereignty, and handed it over to these guys.
Yeah.
The solution is that each individual acknowledge their dependency and their traumas and their shadows, and do the work to heal and accept 100% responsibility and accountability for oneself, and not hand over our power and authority to somebody else.
You have no power over me, like in the labyrinth.
Yeah. So the solution isn't out there. The solution is right
inside.
Here.
Yeah.
And that's why the ceremony that you went through, you know, what did we spend the vast majority of our time doing?
Healing
and connecting and reconciling our relationship with ourselves, and learning how to navigate that within a tribe.
Because I've traveled all over the world, and I've actually was very interested in eco communities, and even you've seen several communities as well, and we both came to this realization that none of them, as great as they were at first, didn't work for one reason or another. And why didn't they work? Because of people who had entitlement or an idea of how it should be. We have a plane flying quite low over us right now because we're under a pilot training school.
So it's for me, I've been doing this for 20 years, and every single time it's failed due to unresolved shadows or traumas or colonial constructs. They're trying to recreate the system. So, you know, how many intentional communities set up a charter and bylaws and rules and regulations to govern the... That's not how relationships are governed.
Yeah.
Relationships are governed by each individual taking responsibility and navigating their own relationships, you know, setting their own boundaries and being able to communicate and connect.
Not you should run it my way, like we can't have this, can't do that. Everybody who wants to live this way in our harmonious eco community has to do it this way, and then it just kind of falls apart.
Right. But that's not how nature navigates relationships.
No.
And nature is our nature. This fictional construct is not our nature. This was designed to enslave and capture us because we were willing to participate in that. So if we want to fix this, in my view, it's about turning inward and doing the work so that we can then stand on our own and be independent and work on our interdependent relationships with other people within our tribe, so that we're no longer dependent on all this. And after a while, this will all become irrelevant.
They're also very afraid of us waking up. They know that we all will wake up, and it's just a matter of time. And they know they've lost, but they also know the people don't know they've lost. So they're trying to milk it for all it's worth too. Right? So they know exactly who we are and what we're capable of, how powerful we are, and that we're equals. Well, but it worked really hard for thousands of years for us not to know that, to disconnect us from our divinity, kind of a thing, to keep us dependent on them.
Right. But I also believe that they're scared.
They're very scared, of course.
Because they're
This
scared.
insecurity, this is bully activity, the way they're acting, like a wild animal backed into a corner, right? Lashing out.
But if these guys don't do the healing, they're going to lash out and attack these guys.
Well, they are also burning us with their and like drowning us with all their weather weapons and so forth.
Yep.
So I mean, they're trying to, wipe us out as quickly as possible too before we wake up as well, because this is all they know. They know this character's, this power, this it's they're afraid of the change and what's going to happen, and also the responsibility that they're going to have to take too, because again, when we show that we're equal, when we refuse to play this game, they still have to answer to everything regardless. And that's how you did it with that letter, is
Yep.
she had to admit that she was involved in all these crimes. And I saw the letters, I saw the list of the crimes, and we can send them to you if you're interested as well, and how to work with Rob more. And so what he's getting at now is doing it on your own is not the way to go. We have to do it collectively. So that's why these ceremonies that he does across Turtle Island, is to find people who are really interested in wanting to do this and live in these kind of communities, living this way without being independent fully and not relying off of them anymore.
Yep.
Anything else? Is that it?
Nothing's coming to me right
Wow,
now.
we did it within an hour, under an hour.
Okay.
So yes, if you want to get in touch with Rob, let me know. I will put out his contact information. He does have some wonderful books like Graduating Life with Honors. He's done an amazing documentary called On Grip. And yeah, lots of...
Yeah, and I have my website.
And he's got his website as well.
Pacemarts.com.
Pacemarts.com.
Pacemarts.
Okay.
So Pacem Arts, everyone's familiar with martial arts,
Yeah.
which is the art of war.
Yeah.
Well, Pacem is Latin for peace, so...
The art of peace.
The art of peace. So I'm teaching the art of peace.
I love it. That's great.
Sadly, I'm the one that coined the Pacem Arts. So there's millions and millions of websites for the martial arts.
Yeah.
But so far, I think I'm the only one that teaches the art of peace.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Rob.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
One more thing we wanted to add, which we remember, of course, afterwards, is if we all collectively got together and decided we're not playing these games anymore, and we returned all of our documents to them, I was saying to Rob, can they still attack us like they will, like they're doing right now? And
I would suggest it's not even collectively, but even at an individual level. In my experience, because I removed myself from their jurisdiction, they don't have jurisdiction over me, so they can't touch me. They can't attack me. I'm protected. And I've felt protected for years now. And so there is a level of protection, but it required me navigating through this old program of fear of authority, because we're all trained and raised to respect and be obedient to authority, and it takes a lot of work to heal that.
Sure does. Yeah. But
when I did it, I went through a lot of fear and that kind of stuff, but I've been protected. I've been through police checkpoints. I've had planes spraying overhead and then turning it off when they went over Silent Dancer.
Wow.
I've had police and authorities speak to me with respect and being timid and extremely careful with their words and asking questions and searching around other jurisdictions to see, like, is this precedent-setting case, and trying to comprehend what I did, because what I do, it confuses them because they don't understand.
I'm sure police, when they come across you, are quite intrigued by you, and because they weren't educated in that way, and then you start saying certain things.
The last two police officers that I ran into, they came with the building inspector and the bylaw enforcement, and I confronted them because they were armed, and the land is a sanctuary, and I challenged them on it, and they're going like, we want nothing to do with this, we're just here just to keep the peace. And they actually stepped back 2 or 3 feet. They didn't want anything to do with it. It's like they didn't even want to be there. So
Wow.
so that's the that's my experience. Like, this is completely different experience than somebody like this
Or giraffe, or
being disobedient and challenging this stuff because of their own ignorance, and then, you know, the police will act against them, and they'll be quite brutal because these guys are ordered to be obedient. And when you're disobedient, they're gonna jump on you.
So that's the other thing too, like, you can never say, hey, I want to come back into the system, because they will jump on you too. You've given away all your documents. And
if I
that's it.
If I ever go back,
there's no going back into the
big
system
trouble.
once you go.
Yeah, they will make an example out of me to try to scare all the rest of these guys to
From ever
be
doing
obedient.
It's interesting how they want us to wake up, but at the same time they don't. Like, this polarity, extreme polarity existing within them, like this beast wanting to protect itself and continue on, yet also tired of the game too, and wanting it to end as well. But yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. And once we all decide we're not playing this game anymore, goodbye, King. There you go.